guys to tell stories all summer of a fantastical kind. And today, I want to talk to you a bit about water. Very common object it is, but you know, it's just always fascinated me. I like it in all shapes and forms, as drinking water, or maybe as rain, or ice, or I do love a good waterfall, and even water the plants. But there's just some types of water that are more talked about than others, and one of those bodies of water being the sea. There are so many fantastical stories that take place on the sea, where sea monsters and sea animals of all kinds roam, and sailors. Sailors are a very common topic. Now, today I will be telling you the story of the sailor and the strange supplies. Now, the story revolves around a boy named Edward. Now, Edward grew up in a small fishing town. He had a harbor right there, and it was so close to the beach, but he always longed for adventure. Yes, he found a few small adventures throughout his little life among the small town, but nothing to really excite him so much. So, whenever he was an older man now, about 18 or so, he signed on with a whaling ship captain. And the captain promised him adventure of all kinds. So, Edward signed on, and then used all his money to buy any supplies he would need. But before he left, his mother gave him a satchel, and in the satchel was 3 items. 1 being a large feather, 2 being a small piece of cloth, and 3 being a chunk of almost rotten meat. Well, Edward thought this was strange, but took his mother's advice and went off. So, not 2 hours into sea, he was now assigned to the crow's nest as a lookout. He was supposed to look out for whale spouts and haul them down to the captain. Well, he was looking out, and he saw something in the water. It wasn't a whale, but it was strange, and so he hauled it down to the captain that he didn't know what it was, but there was something in the water. So all the sailors got their harpoons ready and waited at the sides of the boat. And all of a sudden, a huge beast sprung from the ocean and threw itself against the boat. All the sailors were terrified. Now, this beast was not as big as a boat, and quite smaller actually, kind of stubby. It was a strange fish. But it was enough to quickly digest and eat a full-grown sailor. So they were quite afraid of the thing. So the captain orders all his men down to the bottom of the ship, which is called the hull. But Edward didn't hear this command. He was all the way on top of the crow's nest, the highest point on the ship. So he watched in terror as everybody was fleeing the scene, and the sea monster was still down there. The sea monster threw itself against the ship once more. The ship rocked so that Edward flew down from the crow's nest and landed in the ocean with a splash. It wasn't that long until the beast found him, grabbed it up in his mouth. Edward tried to successfully dodge the teeth, and it almost went down the throat, but he didn't. He held on to the tonsils of the beast and threw himself back into the mouth, wrestled the tongue a bit until it stopped moving and the beast was still in the water. The beast swam off away from the ship. Well, Edward was quickly losing hope. He didn't know what to do until he found the satchel at his side. He took out the feather, knew exactly how to use it. So he took the feather, leaned up against the top of the mouth, and started brushing it, tickling the roof of the mouth. The tongue twitched a bit. He did larger strokes with the feather, just flicking it as he went along, and finally the beast coughed so ferociously that Edward flew out of the beast's mouth and into the open ocean. And at that point he paddled for his life. He paddled and swam away from the beast as fast as he could. The beast was hot on his legs until finally Edward was so close to a deserted island he threw himself on the shore. Seeing that the hunt was lost, the beast refrained and swam back into the ocean. Now Edward was trapped on a seemingly deserted island with almost no animals and fruit too high in the trees that he couldn't reach. After a few days, he began to starve. He could soon see his ribs showing through his chest, and he knew he wasn't going to survive much longer. Just as he was about to lose hope, however, a monkey stumbled out of the palm tree forest one day, and Edward could see that the monkey's leg was twisted in an unhealthy fashion. It was broken. So he ran over to the monkey, picked it up, reset the bone, at which the monkey didn't really like. It hurts a lot. And he took the piece of cloth and wound it around the wound and put twigs in it for a splint. The monkey was so grateful. With his 2 arms and his 1 working leg, he climbed up as many trees as he could and got Edward so many fruits that he could survive a long time. He also showed him fresh water, which is very nice. A few days later, Edward turned his mind to trying to get off the island. He looked around, he saw a few passing ships, he tried to wave them down, he hollered at them, he set fires among the beach, but they didn't see him. Just as he was about to lose hope again, he went out swimming to cool himself. And a shark found him. It swam after Edward, he threw himself on the beach once more, and the shark followed, and it was on the beach. Not in the water, which is not good for a sea animal, by the way. So, Edward, looking at the shark, he noticed that the shark's ribs were showing almost as much as his. He took the rotten meat out of his satchel and fed it to the shark, then pushed the shark back into the water. The shark was so happy that he flung Edward onto his back and swam off on top of the water. Well, the shark was in the water, Edward was on top of the shark, and they were going through the water. About a day and a night into their voyage, the shark finally found Edward's home, threw Edward back on the beach, and Edward was very grateful. Now, Edward ran back to his mother and went to her and told her his story. She knew it. She knew that those 3 things would help him so much, and Edward finally figured he had enough adventure for a while. So he settled down, grew a farm, got married, had children, and tells his children and his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren all the tale every year. At the same time, he had that perilous journey. Well, there we go. I think it was a bit shorter than the last story, but it's a sailing story nonetheless, meant to rattle your bones and make you long for the water. Not to get eaten by a sea monster, of course, but alright, so there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will be back next week with another fantastical story to excite you. Fare thee well, my friends.